Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind, our 77th episode, right before the Christmas holiday. How fun and special. As always, we're going to talk about a movie. We'll do a couple minutes non-spoilers, and then we'll jump into full spoilers. But before that, Niles, how have you been the last couple weeks since we recorded?
Jolly as usual during the holidays. It's been pretty good lately, and just looking forward to seeing family, decompressing from this crazy year that's just been busy and nonstop. And we had a great weekend too, seeing some friends up in Steamboat Springs here in Colorado.
Yeah,
How are you
it was a
doing?
good time. I'm doing all right, ready for the holidays. This last weekend was a lot of fun. First time going to a hot springs for me, so I enjoyed that quite a bit. Very relaxing, just being in a freezing cold place, but being very warm and outside. It was nice.
Yeah, right. It's
Enjoyed
it's
it quite a
novelty.
bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But as always, we are discussing a film. And this week's film is, we're a little late to the party, but we're talking about A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy or quadrilogy, depending on the medium you are talking about. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes follows a young Coriolanus Snow as he is tasked with mentoring a Hunger Games tribute from District 12, Lucy Gray Baird, I think is her last name. And turn her into a spectacle to reinvigorate audience interest in the games. Directed by series veteran Francis Lawrence and written by Michael Leslie, Michael Arndt, and adapted from the novel by Suzanne Collins. The film stars Rachel Zegler, Tom Blythe, Viola Davis, Peter Dinklage, Josh Andres Rivera, and Hunter Schafer. Niles, what are your initial thoughts on The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes?
Yeah. Well, before we dive in, I want to just clarify for everyone that I have not seen all the Hunger Games. I only saw the first three, so I didn't see the final movie. I'll get back to that one day. Definitely after watching this movie, I feel like I need to go back and rewatch some of those films. But The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, this, for me, was a very compelling divergence from the original narrative. I feel like it flips the perspective on its head. If you're familiar with the original series, it's all about Katniss Everdeen and her kind of struggles in District 12 against the the Capitol, against the government, basically everyone who's kind of running the show up there. Yep. Songbirds and Snakes does a 180. It says, okay, rather than showing the perspective of someone in the lower class out in the district who has an incredibly hard life, let's focus on the villain from the original saga, make him the protagonist, set as a prequel, and kind of showcase his perspective from the Capitol rather than District 12. So you got kind of this inner perspective versus the outer perspective. And, I was a little conflicted when I saw the initial trailer for the movie, because I'm like, I got what I needed out of the Hunger Games, and I didn't expect them to revive the franchise after, only a decade has passed since the original saga ended. But so for me, there wasn't really a reason to come back. I needed a good why to come back to this world, especially in one that's as depressing and dystopic as this one. And I also just felt, there wasn't a lot to explore beyond Katniss's story, which, to be fair, isn't fully accurate, because there's like 10 districts where we haven't spent any time in, and we haven't explored them at all, or at least nothing that I can really remember. So there's definitely a lot of potential within this universe still, in this world. And so I think that the inner perspective versus the outer perspective, that was just like a brilliant decision on their part. And also just making Snow, the villain from the original, the protagonist, I thought that was a really cool idea. And so this story just has a lot to say, to me at least. It feels like it's not just like repeating or rehashing the original series. It feels like it's trying to be original, and it's trying to do something, trying to tell a story that we didn't see in the originals. It's very unique, in my opinion. And I think also I just really like the aesthetics of the Hunger Games world too. Like, I love the costumes, the hairstyle,
Mm-hmm.
the makeup. It all just simultaneously feels like steampunk esque and turn of the
It's like Art
century.
Deco a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. And you got kind of some high tech kind of components in there too, or just some absurd qualities in it too. So I just
Mm-hmm.
really like the aesthetics of this world. But I am definitely positive on it. I like this movie, and yeah, it was great to see this kind of prequel. What about you, Dylan? What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I liked this a lot as well, and um my relationship with the Hunger Games is different than yours. Like, I did
Mm-hmm.
see all the movies as they were coming out. I loved the first two, and then I did not really enjoy the Mockingjay movies when they came out. But I did a full rewatch of the series leading up to this, and I think just because I'm older and also my politics have changed quite a lot, like, I really appreciated the Mockingjay movies this go around because they are very I think surprisingly honest about like revolution against a system. And there's and I'll talk about this later on, but it's like there's a point in one of the movies, I think it's in one of the trailers for like Mockingjay Part 1, where Katniss is saying like the enemy is Snow and he poisons everyone and everything and we have to defeat him, and it just reads as so childish and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
ignorant. And then at the end of the movie, she's like realized like, yeah, he's bad and he needs to be defeated, but this is bigger than just one guy. One guy
yeah.
doesn't perpetuate something like this for almost a century, and that is a big part of why I really appreciated Mockingjay on a rewatch, and why I appreciate this as well, as I'll get more into in spoilers, because like it when I was first watching it, I kind of had the image of like, oh, this is how a good person becomes a bad person. That's what this movie is about. It's like he was a nice guy until something happened, and then he became a mean guy. And and it's not really that. It seems like it is because, but then you have to remember the story is from Snow's perspective. We're in his head,
Yeah.
seeing things through his eyes, and remembering that, and I'm excited to rewatch this eventually and be more attentive. I think
Hmm.
the narrative will be much more compelling on a rewatch, actually. But I really loved seeing this universe and the Hunger Games specifically at this much earlier and more low tech era with the
Yeah.
games, at least, because like remember in the original ones, like the arenas are these huge elaborate things, and in this it's an arena. Like it is just a big thing
Yeah.
that they can compete in. um and I thought that was really interesting, and just seeing the comparison and how the impact of events in this movie like lead to the Hunger Games that we see in the originals was pretty wild. I also thought the idea of the audience in the Capitol just not really engaging with the Hunger Games, and that they basically have to create a narrative marketing program for the games,
Yeah. Right.
was really interesting. Because like, and kind of realistic, like even if you're a piece of shit, it would be kind of off-putting to just watch a bunch of children kill each other in an arena. Like you have to be sold on that in order to engage with it, I think. And that was a really interesting premise for me. And I think the main relationship between Snow and the tribute he is meant to mentor, Lucy Gray, played by Rachel Zegler, worked really well. And both Blythe and Zegler do a great job of playing off of each other, so that it's like the relationship feels genuine a lot of the
Mhm.
time, but you never quite get a full read on where they are with each other. And I really thought both the writing and their performances really played into that really well. But yeah, I liked it. I like the art direction as well. I would say if you like the Hunger Games, you'll like this.
Yeah.
and
I would
and if
agree.
you don't, I don't know. You know,
Yeah. Right.
maybe people who don't like the Hunger Games wouldn't like this, but it's a pretty good movie, I would say, and it definitely justifies its own existence in a way that not all prequels manage to do. So,
Exactly. Yeah. I think like, reviving something like a franchise like this after so many years have passed, it's kind of like, oh, you're just digging for money. You're just trying to, make a quick buck for your own purposes as a studio. And this really didn't feel like that. Like the trailer kind of
no.
makes it feel like that, but it honestly was not that. And Yeah, I think that there's great performances all around. I think one of my favorite characters too, without getting too far into spoilers, was Viola Davis's character, the game
Mm-hmm.
master. I think I liked her the most just because she was so deranged and kind of
Yeah.
crazy. Like you compare her to
Yeah,
like
she's pretty insane.
yeah, you compare her to like like the game master from the originals, and it's like he is so tame compared to her. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
just so different. So if they want to continue doing prequels for Hunger Games, please make her the next protagonist because I would love to see how she got like that.
Well, well, I think too what you just said kind of speaks to the like scary nature of this universe. It's like in this era, it takes someone who is a little bit deranged and very clearly cruel to run the games like this, but by the time the original movies take place, just a well-tempered, very personable on TV guy can run the competition for children to kill each other. It really adds that element of normalizing violence. By the time we get to Katniss's era, this is just routine. Like, it's just a thing that happens every year, and everybody's used to it. It's expected. It's normalized.
Yeah,
So
right. Well, I think there's a lot of different comparisons you can make it to, like our modern world too. Kind of what you were talking about with the marketing campaign. Basically, it's like you need to get people invested in this, or else or else it's going to fade out and it's going to fizzle out, and the Hunger Games will be no more. And I feel like you can see some kind of parallels with that with some of the modern day sports, like the NFL. It's like we all know this is a horrible sport for the players. Like they're getting like head injuries. It's going to like basically put them into an early grave because like they're killing themselves slowly on the field, but we're like, yeah, fucking go, like run that ball down the field and shit. And like but it is because of the marketing too that just like continues to drive people to engage with this sport and keep up with it. And if it wasn't for the original days of like the NFL and its like early conception, we would not be in the situation we are today with the sport. But you could also make the case with like American politics too, of like the way that sensationalism has like spurred like this, like I mean, social media especially has just like made politicians so much like more polarizing, and just like everything is now a spectacle when it comes to politics in America, at least.
Yeah. Well, and you can also draw parallels to like what's happening in Gaza right now. It's like the importance of narrative building. If you want to carry out an act of violence, you are starting to see globally amongst the people, like as Israel loses control of the media narrative and people start recognizing the humanity of the people of Palestine, that the sentiment is changing. People are no longer on board with wanton violence and mass murder when you can see the eyes and the hurt of the people who are most affected by it.
Yes.
And like, I'm going to shift back to the movie because I don't want to go on a whole rant again, which I want to do. But like if you do the violence without giving the audience for that violence a story that they can get behind, they turn against you. And that is what this movie is about. And with that, maybe we can go into spoilers and get more into that, if that works.
Let's get into it, into the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is a great name, by the way, too. I like the name for this movie.
Yeah. It was like, that was the like naming structure for a lot of young adult books for a little while. It was like the X of Y and Z.
Yeah, right.
There were a lot of books and stuff that were called that, but one thing just right off the bat, let's talk about the Hunger Games themselves in this, because I was honestly surprised that the games end so relatively early in the film. In the first, in Mockingjay, obviously, the Hunger Games, they're not in them that time, but in the first two movies, like, the Hunger Games themselves, I think, start about the midpoint, and they go to the end. Like, that's the action climax of those movies, but in this, we spend a whole lot of time with our characters post-competition back in District 12, which I saw this criticized a lot for having a negative effect on the pacing of the film, and I do kind of agree with that. Like, the climax of the Hunger Games presents a natural climax to a story, and we just move on beyond that. But I actually thought it was really interesting for the movie's structure, and it caught me off guard, and it distinguished this movie from the others in that way, I think, by making us like live in this world after the competition.
Well, and I think, like what we were just saying too, the movie isn't about the games necessarily. Like they are essential, like point of it. Like the movie's literally named The Hunger Games. So yes, the games are important, but it's not so much about what happens in the games, who kills who, or how they die. It's about the characters, and in this case, very much Snow, Corio, and Lucy, and the relationship that they have. So it's like, yeah, I was kind of surprised too, but I also appreciated that the movie was kind of split up into thirds in a way. So like the first part, they even like label it. You see like part one.
It's like the mentor.
Yeah.
Was it the mentor? The arena is that part two? I forget.
I think so.
It's been a while since I saw it now.
Yeah, but it's something along those lines. But yeah, like part two is just when the games happen, and then part three is just like the aftermath, what happens after that.
Yeah.
And I honestly love that we get the climax of the games, and then it's like, okay, what happens next? Like the narrative for the media is done. What happens now to these characters and to Pan Am as a whole? I thought it was brilliant for them to kind of do that. But yeah.
Yes, I agree. And also it's like it makes us and our protagonists sort of have to reckon with, okay, they seemed like they were kind of romantically into each other during this whole media thing, but like, what does that relationship look like now that one of them is not under threat of death and the other one is not responsible for their care? And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But like, it was an interesting way of connecting the two characters, having him be her mentor. And it's also interesting how the mentor system in this universe, like, it evolves from here. Probably because they realized at a certain point having young people from the capital connect with, like, emotionally with people from the districts who are the same age and maybe really attractive is probably not very good for their politics and what they're meant to do here.
Right. Yeah. We got to control them somehow. But yeah, I liked how different this was from the other iterations we've seen. You get the development of these new technologies like the drones being introduced in the games and the introduction of sponsorship opportunities as well. Like you're kind of starting to collect these points and things that we already know, and like how the games kind of evolve over time with just like these injections of sensationalism, spectacle, and terror. It was just really cool to see those differences and like kind of this founding moment for the games and how they're trying to market it, to position it in a different light, and get people interested to come back and check it out again. It was very cool to see those changes.
Yeah, I did think it was the Weekly Planet guys who said this, but it is kind of humorous that the things Snow suggests they do to revitalize the games are like the things that anybody would think to do if a television program isn't working. It's like you couldn't have thought of that yourself.
Yeah.
You needed this like a high schooler to do it for you, but it works in the context of the story, I think. But yeah. Oh, and the way the mentors evolved, I forgot to specify. It's like in the main movies, it's like previous victors from that district mentor the new contestants, and that's where Woody Harrelson's character comes in and stuff like that. So, which I guess at this stage, not all of the districts have victors, so that can't be the the system just yet.
Yeah, right. Well, and I one of the things too that I like to see on screen here, I feel like they always have done a good job of giving us a good diversity of tributes, with different skill sets and intensities, and just like that guy's, you got to watch out for the lumberjack, like that guy's gonna fuck you up, kind of deal, and this one was, I think, especially gut wrenching because you got to see more like sick people, more people who are like actually like actively fighting a disease or an infection or something like that and slowly dying on screen. You get to see like older people, you get to see younger people, you get to see just a wide diversity of people, and I think it really just highlights how dispassionate and horrific the games are too. And one of the other things that I enjoyed about this movie compared to the originals too was the blatant abuse of power and privilege by those in the Capitol, which is something we didn't really explore in the originals because, Katniss is our focal point and we're just concerned with her.
We don't have that perspective in those films as much.
Exactly. But in this movie, in Songbirds and Snakes, we get to see Plinth, that one student friend of Choreo. He literally enters the arena and should be like executed for interfering or jailed or something, but his father's able to pull some strings in the background to keep him safe and alive.
Oh, Singenis, his buddy. Yeah.
Well,
he's an interesting character as well, because I don't know if you remember, but like he's not from the Capitol. He's from District 2, but it's just like, yeah, and that's super important. And apparently, it's an element that's very clear in the book because we're in Choreo. God, I hate that nickname too. I just don't like the sound of it. But we're in his head in the book. It's from his perspective. And apparently, in the movie, he says he finds him like annoying and he puts up with him to like the other kids. But it does seem like they have a genuine friendship for most of the film. Apparently in the book, he views him as like an irritant and he's very annoyed by his presence. And I think that is one element that the translation to film kind of loses, is how much of a shit Coriolanus is like the whole time, because we don't get to see him judging other people quite as much. Like, but we'll get more into that in a little bit. But yeah, it's like, and that ties into as well, like how much more low tech the Hunger Games are now. Like, Singenis and Snow are both able to just walk into the arena.
Yeah, they got a turnstile thing in front.
Yeah, and he's able to like smuggle stuff in for Lucy Gray to use, like that poison or whatever that she like drops on people. And she also manages to win the games basically without killing anybody, which is kind of novel.
Like
mostly because Snow cheats and like saves her from the snakes. But on that vein too, like because the games are so early on in their lifetime, I guess, and they haven't worked up to this big television show aspect of it yet, like it is just brutal. Like they're just in an arena, and the glamour and the showmanship that we see from Stanley Tucci's character in the original Caesar, and like all the other stuff around it, that's not there. So it literally is just children murdering each other in a room. And it's like, no wonder people tuned out of that. It's uncomfortable to look at. You have to dress it up in all of this stuff that you see in the original films, and that is what this is all about. It's desensitizing people to what they're seeing on their screens.
For real. Well, I mean, the pageantry that they had in this movie was just like, you go down to the zoo and you get to interact with them, and it's like that dehumanizes them so much. But like, in the original series, it's like they have a press tour, literally. Like they're doing all these like talk shows and like talking with the host and like performing, and there's so much showmanship, and it's like, the games really did change. But it's just disgusting. Like it just highlights the brutality and the unfairness and the inequity that exists within this system.
Yeah. And we touched on it in non-spoilers a little bit, but the ambiguity of the central relationship between Lucy Gray and Coriolanus Snow I found really compelling. It's definitely shown to be romantic. They're definitely like flirting with each other and in a romantic relationship. But since the story is told from Snow's point of view, I feel like both the story itself and Zegler's performance as Lucy Gray allow for the interpretation that she is kind of just trying to survive and recognizes that wooing this guy is what she has to do to live, because without his help, she'll die. And to be clear, I'm not saying she's using him. That's not what I'm getting at. But she's a victim put in an impossible situation and is just doing the best she can. But I do feel like she genuinely cares about him as much as a person put in her position can. Like there's a very toxic power dynamic between the two of them, obviously. But I feel like in spite of that, she is a good person and does actually care about him. Like she saves him in the arena early on, remember when that explosion happens, and she didn't have to, but Yeah, what were your thoughts about their dynamic?
I agree with you. I think that their relationship, it comes across as fickle and delicate, and the acting, the performances by these two actors, they do a great job. It brings kind of this push and pull dynamic
Hmm.
to light between them, and um, it is kind of confusing the whole time because I do feel that there's genuine feelings on both sides, and
Hmm.
when you look at how they're presenting these other relationships on screen too, between like the mentor and the mentees, you see some that are just like they're terrified of the
Hmm.
person from the district, like the tribute, or it's just like this can't work. That one, like some of them are using food as weapons with each other to like
Yep.
manipulate them into like doing a better job or
Hmm.
something like that. And it's like, you know just having that diversity that of dynamics on screen, I think did help kind of establish this believability, this relatability
Hmm.
to their dynamic between Lucy and Snow. um, so I agree. I think it's pretty genuine. The one thing for me though that kind of fell short with their relationship was kind of more in the third act, which I think is
Hmm.
great. I think that third part, you do get to see them kind of build the relationship, uh, between each other, and you can kind of see that she's surprised to see him when he's there, and I feel that that's pretty genuine. Um,
Hmm.
I just think that they could have done a little bit better job establishing more distrust between them in that final part. Maybe that's just
Yeah.
me, but I feel that when she basically abandons him in the woods, it's a little too abrupt for me when she's
Hmm.
like, okay, now's
Okay.
the time to ditch him and escape. And, it just kind of leaves me with a lot of questions. And maybe that is a good thing. Maybe that's what was their intention, to be like, was she always planning
Hmm.
to run away? Was this an impulse decision? Was it because all of a sudden she started just to distrust him because he wouldn't tell her, like, I think she was asking him, like, who was the third person you killed? And he wouldn't
Yeah.
say,
Hmm.
so I think they could have done a little bit better at that, of like giving like that kind of foundation for the distrust between them, and kind of the ending of their relationship.
Yeah, and I think it is meant to be ambiguous, but I did hear that it's like in this point where he slips up and reveals that he's killed a third person, and she's only seen two. The third person being Sejanus, and I think she also is realizing, like, maybe she realizes it is Sejanus that he killed, and also she verbally points out it's like, I'm the only loose end left to
Mm-hmm.
cover up the stuff you did. Um but I do think it's meant to be ambiguous. Like, was she even running away from him, really? Or
Mm-hmm.
was she just doing what she said and was going to come back? We're not meant to know because Snow doesn't know. And this experience, I think, is what it's like, the final push over the edge
Mm-hmm.
to making him the man he becomes later on. Um, and I want to talk more about that a little bit later, because there is a lot more to his arc than that. And I initially, when I left the theater, I didn't like it as much because I felt like, oh, that's just really like simple and cliche. It's like, oh, he fell in love and he got spurned at the end, and then that's what made him a bad guy who like does fascism for decades. It's like okay, yeah, that's like solid melodrama, but that's a very played out thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more complicated than that, and I want to talk about that more a little bit later when we talk about him specifically. But yeah, this relationship is very much the emotional center of the whole piece, and it is what ties the first two acts so seamlessly with the third, when the plot doesn't really do that as much, because it does feel like a whole different movie in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Because he gets exiled from the capital because he cheats by giving her extra shit in the games, and so he goes and becomes like a cop on the far reaches of society.
Yep.
And I was like, when he goes out there, I was like, oh, it will be really interesting if she's not happy to see him,
Yeah.
because she was just trying to fucking survive, and this fucking dude shows up at her door expecting like a romance. And I thought that was where they were going to go, where she's like, I don't want this. But
Mm-hmm.
it was actually interesting the way it panned out, and it was something different.
Yeah, I agree. I felt that the relationship, it is definitely the heart of their movie, and I found it far more convincing and dynamic and interesting than the love triangle in the original saga. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
who is Katniss gonna pick, Peeta or the other guy?
Gale.
Gale, yeah. How was his name? Oh God.
Yeah, that's his name. Yeah. Well, it's weird because like it in the first two movies, Gale is such a minor character because most of the time is spent with like Katniss and Peeta in the games, and then but like her character seems to prefer Gale a whole lot, and it is kind of like silly the way that they resolve the love triangle because it's just like she doesn't really have to make a choice ultimately. It just turns out that Gale builds a war crime bomb and the war crime bomb kills her little sister. So she's like, all right, bye.
Like, decision made.
Yeah. It is a war crime bomb. It's like a bomb that explodes and kills a bunch of people and then like just sits dormant so people can rush in to go help, and then it goes off a second time.
Oh,
and her sister like becomes her sister becomes a doctor and like gets brought in to like help all the people like on both sides of this conflict who got hit by the bomb, and she gets blown up.
Oh no, that's terrible.
Yeah, and it's like the whole reason she went into the games in the first place was to protect her little sister, and then she gets blown up by her boyfriend. And like, then they break.
I guess we're not dating anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, you put in here, and this is a big part of this movie. What are the Hunger Games about?
Yes, so, this is the question that the game master poses, that Viola Davis says to Corio and several other people throughout the movie. Like, what is it about? And people offer these different question or answers and perspectives, and you can dissect those and dive into them as much as you want, but I was thinking more in terms of the movies rather than what she's actually asking here. That's kind of where I was going to go with it. And I think in the original narratives, to me, in those original movies, to me they felt like pieces of commentary on class struggles, on social inequalities and inequities, and the concepts of revolution and rebellion. Like you were kind of saying earlier, for so long in those movies, it was like Snow is the enemy. He's the guy who needs to come down, and we need to bring him down. And he was the enemy of the people. And it's framed that way, at least. But I think ultimately, again, I didn't finish the series, but I think it kind of becomes clear by the end of the movies that it's like he's just a figurehead. The real issue isn't Snow; it's the government. It's the systems in place that oppress the lower classes,
right.
And that I think is what the original movies were about, is these concepts of class struggles, but then also it's not this one person, it's not the president, it's not the prime minister or anybody, it is the system as a whole that's failing you and oppressing you,
which is what makes like change difficult. It's not like you can fight the big boss in the movie and then it's not like in Star Wars where you throw the Emperor off a thing and then everybody parties across the galaxy. It's more complicated than that because which is explored in future Star Wars entries and stuff like that, but that's not the point. It's like it's more realistic, and that's one thing I appreciated about the Mockingjay movies on my rewatch is that after the revolution wins, they have Snow as a prisoner, and but Coin, Julianne Moore's character, who is like the new president who was leading the revolution, she wants to make a new Hunger Games, but this time for the Capitol's children. And Katniss finally starts to realize that like Snow is just a symptom of a rotten system, and he's not like a supervillain you can like beat and erase all the suffering that caused everything up until this point. And so at the end, she's like supposed to execute Snow publicly, and she just fucking shoots Julianne Moore instead. And then the people kill Snow, and then it's like the remaining people are trying to make a better world and change the things that are actually broken, which is, nice. And like Katniss's initial hate, like zeroing in on Snow specifically as the cause of the problem makes sense because she's like 16 or something in those movies. So it works in that context. But from this perspective, it is from the jump exploring it on a more systemic and nuanced level than those movies start explaining them.
Exactly. Yeah. And this prequel, I think, it revisits a lot of those themes that we talked about, this commentaries, but it injects, more nuance, more layers into the discussion. Our protagonist, he comes from the capital, or at least, one of those, I can't remember if it was exactly the capital or just like some of those top
He was
districts.
from the capital. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. And so we get to see the other side of this us versus them narrative from the originals. The originals, it's like District 12, the extreme lower class, extreme poverty, rising up against the system and against like the oppressors in the capital who are living these luxurious and wealthy lives. And then we get to see in this movie, Koryo, he lives in the capital with his family, but it doesn't mean that they're like well loved or well liked. Like his father was like a traitor, I guess. I don't know. But I
don't think he was a traitor. I think he just like failed at something. Like his operation went wrong or something like that.
And like his family's like social status kind of is devalued by that. And so he's like trying hard to, at least that's how it's presented. I didn't read the book for this, but he's trying hard to climb these ranks through his education and restore his family's kind of status and nobility in this place. But he still is coming from a very privileged position. He's got definitely higher status than people in District 3, District 7, it's all these other districts. And so it is kind of this little bit of a balancing act, this nuance of like you get to see the struggles that his family faces, even when they have so much. And, while he is still a member of the upper class and he eventually becomes that ruler with an iron fist and becomes, the enemy of the people, I think as the audience, we get to understand a little bit more of his background. And, I'm not saying that his life was full of struggles, but, you get to his perspective, I think just adds another layer to the story that, is needed.
Yeah, well, I think he did have struggles, and I think that's what this movie does really well. Because like there's the part where his cousin Tigress like makes the shirt buttons out of like bathroom tile or something for him, and like works on his clothes, and I think the movie does a really good job of showing, and this is why I appreciate it more than I initially did or more than I thought I would, is that he is like kind of shitty from the get-go. We just don't recognize it as much because we're in his perspective. But it shows how someone can be molded into a monster by just existing in a certain society, right? Because he is kind of an underdog in a lot of ways when he's around his peers. And he seems like a mostly normal guy when he's interacting with them, right? But he's also always so dispassionate about the plight of the people in the districts, and apparently in the books, like I mentioned earlier, like views Sejanus as an irritant. And it's kind of like us, Americans, who like we are growing up like Snow is growing up in the capital, the imperial core of Pan Am. We are growing up in the imperial core of the American Empire, right? And we grew up to varying degrees, like viewing our country as sometimes the good guys, fighting against those people who are attacking us all the time. And everybody hates us for some reason.
Yeah.
And we have to fight back. We're freedom. And and we're seeing the same thing in fucking Israel right now. Israel and America are very fucking similar in a lot of ways, and this is one of them. But it's like, well, yeah, they're fighting back against the districts who rebelled. It's like, well, okay. Why did they rebel? What was happening that caused them to rebel? And it's like, yes, the violence that little child Snow experienced was horrible, and it probably shaped him. But it's like, and that shouldn't have happened to you as a small child, of course. But that doesn't justify inflicting violence on other people for generations to come. And I think like this movie came out at a very fucking appropriate time in world history, I think. But
yes,
because it shows like how someone can be both shaped by their own experiences and have those experiences used to propagandize a worldview. and mold you into someone that you otherwise might not have been. Because like the pain he experienced as a child is very real, and he has a right to feel hurt as a result of that. But then that is redirected into making him cruel and violent. And that's what I was saying earlier. It's like I felt at first that his turn to villainy at the end was too abrupt, but it's not, because it was always there. That mindset was always there. Mm-hmm. And he liked Lucy Gray because she's a pretty lady that he kind of fell in love with, but he doesn't like the people of District 12. He doesn't care about them. Yeah. He cares about one person specifically. Whereas Sejanus, in contrast, when they go out to the districts, like, because he has empathy for that experience, being a district person himself, he changes and wants to make the world better. And then Snow gets him killed. Like, he turns him in. He gets him killed. And
yeah, that was a heartbreaking moment for sure. But you're totally right, though. Because, when I first left the theater, I think I was feeling a little bit similar to you of like, that was way too, like, he goes through all this stuff and all these experiences with Lucy, and he sympathizes with her. He understands her. And like,
Lucy Gray, Niles. Lucy Gray. It's very important.
I know. Yeah. But, it does kind of feel like she's shattered his kind of hard exterior and gotten underneath him. And so I was kind of in a similar boat, like, what the fuck? Why does he go on to be this horrible person? But you're right. It is because he grew up in these conditions already. He's experienced so much, and he's already been working towards this goal for so long. His family lives in the capital, and he's kind of he has to provide for them because they just can't for some reason. And
well, and like his nice old grandma, remember, like such a nice lady, and then she starts talking about the people from the districts like they're fucking animals, remember? And it's like there's so many people like that. It's like just kind seeming normal people, but then you hit them on that one topic and it's like, wait, you sound like a Nazi. What the fuck?
I know. Like yes, sometimes I go to some like networking events and I'm having a nice conversation with someone, and then someone mentions homeless people in Denver, and all of a sudden their tone just immediately changes from totally sympathetic to just, we got to get them the fuck out of this city. And it's like,
I know
what happened here. Where'd humanity
go? And it's like that is all molded by this broader society that we're a part of, and culture, and the media we consume, and all of that all plays in. And that's what this movie, I think, in large part is about. It's about how the culture molds otherwise totally normal, nice people into tyrants.
Yes. Yes, this is very true, and it adds that perspective that we already talked about. But yeah, it's fucking messed up.
Yeah, but how did you feel? So we didn't even talk about Peter Dinklage. He's in this movie. He plays a character named something Highbottom, which I found fun. But what did you think about his hatred for Choreo Snow and how that reveal unfolds? Because I really liked the reveal that Highbottom was the one who, like, he was really drunk with his buddy who was Snow's dad, and he just was like, I forget, they like get assigned a project for what to do with the districts, and he like is drunk, and he's like, oh, put him in a fucking arena and they can all kill each other, and then Snow's dad actualizes that idea, which Highbottom regrets the game's existence, and he hopes that as interest wanes, they will die out because it's his greatest mistake, only for the next generation of Snow to come along and totally revitalize them into this long-lasting institution.
Yeah,
so what do you think?
It does kind of come full circle there, and Peter Dinklage working with two different Snows on two different forms of media,
yeah, true. Very different.
Game of Thrones to a different type of game, and working with Snow still. But yeah, I did like the reveal fine, I suppose. I always kind of felt that we were going to get something like that, because the whole movie he's hinting at it, kind of dropping these little hints of like, I'm never going to let you,
he really hates him.
Yeah, he really does. He's like, even if you win, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you never see a cent of that grant money. And it's like, wow, you really do hate this guy. I thought the reveal was fine, though. Overall, I liked it. I think out of all the characters on screen that were presented, I think I found High Bottom the least interesting, but that was just me. So
he does kind of disappear for a large chunk of the movie. Like, he's not really a major player from when the games start. Like, the whole game sequence, he's kind of absent for a little bit. And then once he gets Snow exiled, he exits the film again for like 45 minutes, just due to the nature of the plot. We also have the one thing I didn't talk about, but Jason Schwartzman as the first game, like the host. I thought it was so, the way it's presented in such a different way, because like that's Caesar's job in the first movies. In this one, this guy's the weatherman, and he's just like this year's rotating host. And I love how, like, when there's like downtime in the games, he just goes back to reporting the weather or doing the nightly news. And it's like they were surprised this year that the games went on long enough to go through the night. You know, like they weren't prepared as a production for that to happen. I thought that was a really interesting element as well. And they just have to like fill airtime.
Yeah. They're like, what do we do now? And like, he has to like make that phone call of like, I need to change my reservation. Probably push it back 30 minutes. I think I'll get there.
Yeah.
But I liked him as a character too. I thought he was very funny, and he had some good, comedic wit to the film too.
And then last thing about this film. So do you think Lucy Gray died at the end?
I do not. I don't see how you can think that. I know they kind of imply it, that maybe he shot her when he's like, when Slim Shady's in the woods and he's looking around and he doesn't see her. Yeah, I know, right? When he shaves his head, I'm like, wow, look, Eminem's back on screen with the dog tags and everything. But yeah, I mean, when he's at the end and he shoots, he's like shooting at the birds and stuff, like, it does seem like he's trying, obviously. Their bond has been broken, but I think in my head, my headcanon, she's still alive, and that makes more sense for me, and that leaves the door open for a sequel if they wanted to. I don't think that they should, because they've told the story they need to, and it would be gratuitous at this point. But I think, in my opinion, it's better for her to escape and kind of go north of Pan Am to live with whoever's up there. I think that's a far more fitting
Canadians
end for her. Yeah, the Canadians.
Well, because Pan Am is supposed to be a future United States, from what I understand. District 12 is like West Virginia or something like that, coal mining district. Huh. Yeah, but I like, again, I think it's meant to be ambiguous. But I also did not, when I watched the movie, I did not get the impression that he actually shot her. I got the impression that he was just like losing it a bit. Which I think is interesting, because the snake that bites him is not venomous, and it's like, maybe she left that as a trap, maybe she didn't, who knows? But he thinks she left it as a trap, and it's something that I think is just meant to haunt Snow going forward. And in his mind, he probably thinks like, well, I was trying to do right by people. I was trying to do the right thing, and then I got betrayed. So now I'm gonna do my own thing now, and I'm a harder person, and I'm gonna go down this different path. But in reality, it's like, you were kind of always that way. But we're in his perspective, and this is his moment where he returns, and he's like, he puts on the fancy clothes and he walks up to the camera, and the movie ends.
Yep.
And and you have that element of when he kills the kid in the arena, and he talks to the game master, and he comes to the realization, it's like, the purpose of the games is because that's what the world is. That's who we really are, and it's just about like peeling back the artifice and exposing us for the people that we truly are when the chips are down. And that's his arc, basically, I guess, is discovering who he really is, and who he really is a fascist.
Yep, a fascist who will fire when he hears a twig snap in the woods. Yeah.
But you mentioned something earlier that reminded me of, in the first movie, Snow asks the game master, "Why do we have victors?" He's like, "Why not just round up the kids at random and just kill them?" And it's because he's like, we need that little crumb of hope, because that's what keeps the whole system going. And you know what that reminds me of is capitalism. Hey.
Capitalism.
Because realistically, you're not going to make it. You're not going to be rich. But there's always that hope that you might be the guy. You know, you might, it might be you.
Yeah.
It won't be, but it might be.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I don't know if that was an intentional critique of capitalism, but that's what I took from it in this moment when I just remembered the line.
There are so many ways
it works in the world building of this game, too. Because it's if they just rounded them all up and killed them, then immediately the atrocity is much more clear. There's no artifice. There's no gamesmanship about it anymore. It's just murder, but with the competition, with the hope. It's well, my kid might come home.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not, but they might. And so I have to be good so that they have a chance, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, and you got to create that illusion of chance, too, where it's because so much of that, you see it in there, too, of it's just manipulating. It's just getting resources, sponsorship deals, and then you can give it to your person in the arena, or you can cheat and they'll survive. And it's there's so many ways that you could game the system, even if you think that it's fair.
Actually, you know what? The fucking capitalism metaphor is explicit, because in the top two districts, there are people who go to schools and train their entire lives to go to the Hunger Games, and they volunteer. It's totally a critique of fucking capitalism. It's because they have privilege. Oh my God. They have a higher... Look at that.
This is how they'll remember me.
All right. Any final thoughts on Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes?
No, not really. I mean, I'd just say I'd recommend it, especially if you watch the originals. It's not just a petty cash grab. I think this movie does have a good story and something to say. What about you, Dylan? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really good. And I think it's a worthwhile addition to the story, and it has not only something to say, but something different to say. About the systems we all live in and are a part of, and I think it does a pretty good job of exploring those. So yeah, I mean, you've probably already seen it if you're interested in it, but go check it out. But yeah,
rewatch
and
it.
with
Let us know your thoughts if you find anything new. But let's transition to the final part of the episode where we talk about stuff we've been up to, media we're consuming, shows we're watching. Movies we've watched, any other things like that. Dylan, what have you been up to since our last episode?
Still reading the Cryptonomicon a little bit. I haven't gotten that much farther. It's I think it's going to take probably 150 pages to really sink into the rhythm of this book. It's a very big book and it jumps around at different time periods a lot, and I'm a little confused, but I'm interested in it. So, carrying on. And then I started playing Jedi Survivor, the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order. I'm liking that so far. I'm not that far into it, but, always love a good Star Wars game. They're too few and far between these days. Yep. And also, I started another Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough. I don't need to do that. But I was I made my first D&D character on the last playthrough. What if I made my second D&D character and did another playthrough? It's I can play out a different class and make some different choices. Probably the same choices because I like the story I got the first time, but we'll see.
You'll have to keep marks of how much you deviate.
Yeah, well, there are certain things that I realized. This character died because I didn't go to this place fast enough. So I'm seeing what'll happen if I go here in time and save them and stuff like that. And also, trying to role play a little bit. The characters I played had different personalities in D&D, so I should role play this character differently than I did my first one. Stuff like that. And also there's at the beginning of the game, you have the first big fight. The game tells you, the NPCs in the game, it's go just do this thing. I'll handle this fight. But if you act, and you have 15 turns to accomplish this task. But if you do stay and fight and manage to kill the guy that this Mind Flayer is fighting, it gives you a really, really cool sword that's pretty powerful in the early game. And I replayed the fight 4 times, got the sword, and so now I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Dope!
But, yeah, it's awesome. It's a massive flaming 2-handed sword, which is perfect for
the
class I'm playing. But also continuing on with For All Mankind and Monarch Legacy of Monsters, Godzilla finally showed up in the Monarch show, which, okay, I think we talked about this in Godzilla vs. Kong in our episode on that from many years ago now. But the longer the MonsterVerse goes on, the more confused I am about how big Godzilla is supposed to be. Because he seems to be a different size every time I see him. And I don't know what to... Like, in this show, it has flashbacks to the first original movie where Godzilla, like, walks through the Golden Gate Bridge. But when he shows up in this, it's like it seems like he's a third of the size that he would need to be to do that. So I just don't know anymore. And I think they don't care. And they just like adjust. They just like scale the digital model to whatever works best in the scene he's currently in, which is pretty funny.
Oh, God. That's funny.
But For All Mankind, I still like that show a lot. It's interesting. It's like it's cool how it goes from like the 60s all the way into the 2000s. And shows how like the different history works out. And one thing I noticed about this season is in the world of For All Mankind, 9/11 didn't happen because here history time, because the 9/11 was carried out by Al Qaeda, right? Osama bin Laden and his people, right? And they developed their like resentment for the West and America when they were CIA assets during the Soviet-Afghan War, I believe. And so, because in this universe, during that time, the Soviets and the Americans were focused on the space race and eventually starting to collaborate with each other. Probably the Soviet-Afghan War never fucking happened. So the Mujahideen were never trained by the CIA and never splintered into becoming the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, so 9/11 never happened.
Wow, I need to watch this show.
It doesn't even mention or address that at all, but like, because it time jumps a whole lot pretty frequently, and during the bigger time jumps, it'll do like a whole montage of like the alternate history that's been happening. It's like, in their world, John Lennon is still alive. Like, stuff like that. Big change. It's like, they'll show like newspapers of things that point out like the differences in the timelines. And they didn't even mention 9/11, but I was just thinking about it after the last episode. I was like, wait, they just mentioned it's 2003. No one talked about 9/11. It didn't fucking happen here.
It's like, okay.
But what about you? What have you been watching?
Yeah, well, not that. A few different shows. Continuing on with Fargo season 5. Loving it. It is amazing. The characters are just fantastic. John Hamm is intimidating as fuck as this corrupt sheriff character. And yeah, if you haven't seen Fargo, I definitely recommend all the seasons. This newest one's great too. Yeah, I haven't been watching too much new content. Just we've been watching Ghost Adventures every now and then. Still funny, still classic, still so dated in some capacities, but love it because it's just silly and fun. And you know, they generally do believe in the ghosts, and I do too. But there's definitely some evidence where I'm like, that is a load of crap. That is a mouse squeaking down the hall. Like, that is not a ghost, you idiots. But yeah. Whatever. I'm yelling at them over a TV show that's over 10 years old at this point. So, but one of the things that I did discover recently, I don't think I mentioned it on the last episode, is this amazing YouTube channel called League of Pigs. And I keep telling people about it, and I keep feeling weirder and weirder when I talk about it, but I love it. It is literally what it sounds like. It is a racing league of pigs, and
yay.
They're like these tiny pigs. They're not like huge, like pigs that you find in a slaughterhouse. They're like kind of more, they're not micro pigs, but they're smaller. They only get like maybe 65 pounds, maybe like, maybe 3 feet
they're fast.
long. I don't know. Yeah, pretty small things. But it's just so funny. It's the same 5 pigs every race, and they have like, they're up to 10 seasons so far, and they tally up the points after every race. So there's 3 rounds in a championship each round has 8 races, and the racetracks vary. Sometimes it's like kind of an oval thing, or it's a straight line, or they add obstacles, or like other things. I love it. I think it's just so funny and so cute, and I honestly wish that I found it sooner, because now it's starting to blow up, and I'm like, my hipster mojo, where's it going? But
it was never really there.
yeah, honestly. But I would encourage everyone to check out the League of Pigs. It is just a fun, low stakes racing league.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think that might do it for us for this episode and the year. Which is crazy. Another year in the books. Happy. We will not have another episode before the new year. So happy holidays to everyone. I'm pretty sure Hanukkah is over. So hope y'all had a happy Hanukkah if that's what you celebrate. If you've got Kwanzaa or Christmas coming up still, happy fucking holidays. Have a great time. Happy New Year. And we probably will not. We would be scheduled to have a new episode on the 3rd. I don't think that's going to happen, so probably plan for our return on the 10th. And we have, God, there's a lot coming out that we can talk about. We got like The Boy and the Heron, Aquaman 2, Wonka.
Oh, man.
Who knows? Hopefully the January release slate is like dead, so we have time to talk about all that stuff. But we'll see y'all back in 2024. Until then, Niles, where can people find you on the interwebs?
On the interwebs, you can go to that Instagram.com and follow Niles Got No Styles. That's me over there. Dylan, where can people follow you on the intertubes?
On Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at D-Day Movies, on YouTube at D-Day Movies, and then on Twitch at D-Day_movies. You can find both of us here at Play Pause Rewind, both on your podcast platform of choice, as well as on YouTube. And on our second channel, Play Pause Rewind Videos. Maybe check out one of our Rewind videos over the holiday. We've done one on Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Star Wars Original Trilogy. They're both more edited, structured conversations that are really deep dives into those topics. So, entertain yourselves with that until you can see us again. But thank you all so much for watching and or listening. Please leave us a review if you'd like, or like and subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see y'all next year.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.